Well, boys, over the years, the health of the athlete has become absolute paramount, and someone that knows that more than most is our next guest, Victoria Veitch, from
Edwina Reed Neurophysiotherapy.
You know, over the years, Victoria, the athlete has become paramount in their health, because gone are the days, in my day, a couple of decades ago, when a player would take a big hit and we all loved them to get back up and keep going. That's not what we do these days.
No, with the advent of some reasonably concerning research and obviously access to medical imaging, which is really showing us what happens to the brain as consecutive injuries occur, really has brought into the spotlight, like you said, that a hit to the head is no longer a small deal. And as much as athletes want to be the tough guy, be the tough girl and run back onto the field, it's really not the thing to be doing anymore.
You know, and I guess the sports governing bodies in some ways need to be commended for the work that they've done, because they've tried where possible to keep that contact, that heavy contact, out of sports. And I guess football and rugby are the most obvious examples, but just take us through what a hard hit, what someone being concussed actually does to them.
Yeah. And I can guess why those governing bodies are in such a difficult situation as well. The heaviness of a sport is what so many spectators go to a game to look at, and they must attract so much criticism for trying to diminish aspects of play. And at the same time, you've got pressure from coaches and sponsors who want their best players on the ground at any given time. So I can imagine what the conflict must be like. But what a heavy hit does to the brain. You know, obviously you've got these amazing neural structures, unfortunately or fortunately, encased in a very hard protective shell. When you get a heavy hit, your brain is literally bouncing against your skull. So that's why the symptoms can be so multifactorial and so diverse, because in respect to which way the brain bounces and where it bleeds, where it stretches, where it swells, is how, you know, you can have really such a devastating injury with so many different symptoms.
So the testing that happens on field, the testing that happens off field, how accurate do we deem that to be? I guess it's part of ticking the boxes that we need to be as safe as possible, but I guess it's not 100% accurate.
Look, the medical personnel on staff are now getting concussion training.
It's a lot of pressure on them as well.
Absolutely. And again, when we look at the conflict between the aims of the game and the goals of the player and the team, those medical professionals really do rely on honest feedback from their athletes. How many athletes maybe aren't telling the full picture of what they're feeling because they just want to get back on the field.
Don't want to let their teammates down.
Don't want to get their teammates down, and that's why the training of those medical personnel are really quite critical. Being able to do the ocular exams and the reflex testing and determine whether there are physical signs that maybe an athlete isn't disclosing. But obviously, if the athlete is disclosing any number of symptoms, dizziness, nausea, headaches, incoordination, lack of balance, lack of arousal or sleepiness or fatigue. You know, all of those have to be considered as possible concussive syndrome and acted on accordingly. That player needs to be withdrawn from the field.
You know, we see someone, an athlete of any sort, do a hamstring or do a shoulder or, heaven forbid, break a limb, we get it. And we say they can't go on. They're no good there. But it's the hidden nature of this injury that makes it probably so hard one to measure for everyone involved.
And it's a far more critical injury. Look, not that I'm sure that a hamstring is really important in the general scheme of life. What we see with the brain with successive injury is the predisposition to degenerative diseases later on in life. You know, and there are concerning stories about, you know, several well-known footballers and other athletes who are having memory difficulties, who are having motor issues. You know, Muhammad Ali, perfect example of degenerative Parkinson's disease from a life of getting his head basically brutalised. So.
You know, I watched that movie, I'm not sure whether it's relevant, I think it is, with Will Smith and concussion. It actually gave me a really good understanding, because I think we're quite dismissive of things we don't understand, but that gave a really good insight for me. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie.
I haven't, but I will.
You know, look, it really is, and what it gave me, and I'm sure for our viewers that have seen it, it gave you a better insight and understanding to the importance of the long-term health of the athlete. It's not all about winning today or the grand final this year. It's about this person living a healthy and happy life in decades to come.
Yeah, and there's got to be a life after sport.
Sure.
You know, and we're trying very much within several of the sporting codes to make sure athletes have a life after their sport. Maybe 10 years ago, the focus was really on the arthritic and other musculoskeletal degenerative diseases that athletes were ending up with. But you know, the brain injury now, or the successive concussive injury, is really taking a fore. But yeah, no, I would very much like to see that movie, and I think what it helps people understand is the hidden element of brain injury.
Yeah.
Just because you're not limping, just because, you know, you're not covered in bandages or gushing blood, doesn't mean you don't actually have a very serious situation going on.
Just finally, we've gone a long way, haven't we, in the last decade, I guess. How much further can we go to ensure, as much as possible, the athletes kept protected? Do you feel as though, from a professional rather than a sporting perspective, that there's still a little way to go?
I think the codes and the administrators and the medical personnel working with the teams are certainly on the right track. They've got the training and the awareness. I think what probably still needs to be picked up is general awareness for concussive or brain injury. So the mums and dads understanding why it is their coach is forcing their child off a field, and don't go against that tide of advice. Understand that decision is being made in the best interest of that athlete. The mums and the dads and the athletes, they need to know that if their son, their child, their daughter is experiencing a deterioration in symptoms, many hours or even a day or so after the event, they need to get that checked out.
Sure.
Brain injury is not a then and now. It's not hit your head, you have symptoms. The brain takes time for swelling and inflammation to reach a peak. So it can be several days before you have any symptoms at all. And so then it seems really confusing.
And there has been instances, I think, locally in recent years of that exact thing, and whether it's resulted in a tragedy.
Absolutely. You know, I've got so many memories of many of the rehabilitation clients that I've seen over the year. You know, young kids on motorbikes trying to emulate the crusty demons. You know, young kid, country property, has a motorbike accident. He walked 5 hours to get to the front gate of his homestead, collapsed at the front gate of his homestead, devastating brain injury, never walked again.
Wow.
So it's not about when you hit your head, it is about your neurological function in the hours and days after the event. Well,
we've got some athletes I'd like to talk to you about next week, in particular Libby Hopwood, a friend of ours at the SA Sports Show, and a friend of yours in Meg Lemon, of course, who's had to face some challenges as well. Look forward to it. All right, and also your involvement with the Mercedes-Benz Blackmore cycling team, which would be great to have a chat about as well. Excellent. Victoria Veitch, a neurophysiotherapist. Hope we've all learned a bit. We'll learn a bit more next week when Victoria joins us again.